Namaste everyone and welcome to this session which is titled Complete IPMAT 2027 Strategy for Beginners. And as the name suggests, I'll be taking you through the entire step-by-step process that you can follow for your IPMAT 2027 exam. It doesn't matter if you are new to the IPMAT ecosystem, you haven't really got to know in detail as to what the exam is about, how to go about preparation, how to manage board exams that are going to happen in 12th standard along with your IPMAT preparation. If you're taking a drop, then what is it that you could do? There are a lot of questions that some of you might have in your head. Today, this session is going to help you understand answers to all those queries that some of you might have. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right in to the first part, which is the target exam timeline. So understand that IPMAT 2027 is expected to happen somewhere in the first week of May. So approximately 260 plus odd days is what the time is left with us if you are targeting IPMAT 2027. Now, what is it that we can do in these 260 days is something that we need to understand and then follow. So if we move ahead, this is the important pattern that everybody should be very familiar with. Understand that there are three sections. One is quantitative ability, and there are short answer type questions, which means you have to input your answer via an on-screen keyboard. You don't get four options, so it's not multiple choice questions, it's not MCQ. And the advantage is that there is no negative marking here. So 15 questions, 40 minutes, and you get +4 for every right and 0 if you get it wrong, which means one important takeaway. And why is this important when we are starting our preparation? Because we need to keep this in our head that as far as the short answer type section is concerned, we can randomly take a calculated guess as well without any risk of negative marking. So a general tip, remember this, that whenever you are attempting the essay section, attempt all 15 questions. So, you could try and solve and get the answer and then mark. Otherwise, if you have just read the question, there is no harm in thinking of a logical answer, which is very easy to get right as well in some of the questions if you look at some of the past papers. So make sure that you attempt all questions there. Then the second section is QA MCQ, which has multiple choice options. +4 is the marking that you get for correct and -1 for every incorrect. You have around 30 questions, exact 30 questions in fact, for 40 minutes. And you have a separate cutoff for both essay as well as MCQ. When it comes to the verbal ability section, 45 questions and 40 marks, 40 minutes. So if you look at the pattern, just by observation, can you identify the percentage of weight in terms of the marks out of the entire paper? If you look at 15 and 30, that makes it 45 questions, and that is equal to the verbal ability questions, which means 50% of your paper is verbal ability. And it isn't surprising that if you look at the past year's cutoff, you would realize that verbal ability has a very high cutoff, primarily because of the reason that it is more doable because a lot of RCs, so people tend to attempt those RCs even if they haven't had a lot of preparation. A lot of it has to do with grammar, vocabulary, whereas QA section would require a lot of solving on the part, and therefore the cutoffs for the QA section are slightly lower compared to VA. Let's look at those cutoffs now to understand, before we start our preparation in a structured manner, what is the expectation in the actual exam. So this gives us a good clarity that if you look at the 2026 actual cutoff for quantitative ability essay section, it is equivalent to 7 net questions, right? Remember, +4 for every correct. So 7 4s are 28 marks is the cutoff. So out of 15, if you get 7 right, then you are clearing the cutoff as far as last year's paper is concerned. Can you attempt around 8 to 10 questions? Yes. So understand, based on this, that this exam does not require you to be able to attempt all questions. And this is important because the way our education system teaches us that if there is a question paper, we have to attempt all questions, get them all right, or maybe get almost all questions right. We can probably skip one or two. The competitive exam situation is fairly different from your usual board exams, where even if you attempt 10 questions, get 9 correct and 1 wrong, you're comfortably clearing the cutoff. And similarly, if you look at MCQ, very close to, and if you look at the trend pattern across the years, except 2023, where there was a considerable gap, and 2022, again a considerable gap, for the past 2 years, the cutoff for essay and MCQ have been very close by. Again, if you look at 8 questions correct and maybe 2 or 3 wrong, because there is negative marking here. So if you attempt 10 questions, 8 correct, 2 wrong. So 8 4s are 32 minus 2, 30 would be your score, which would be a comfortable margin above your cutoff for MCQ section. So around Again, out of 30 questions, you're expected to attempt 10, get 8 right, and you're clearing cutoff. If possible, the idea should be to get as high a marks as possible, and therefore attempt maybe 14 odd questions, 15 odd questions if possible, maybe even more. Verbal ability, the cutoff is around 111. So if you just take into account net questions correct, 28 Forza would be 112. And therefore, if you just attempt 28 and get all of them right, you are clearing cutoff out of 45 questions. Now, this is slightly challenging from the perspective of getting those questions right, because English is very subjective in nature. And therefore, sometimes you might have this opinion that as far as I am concerned, my answer in RC would have been this, but then they have given the correct answer as something else. You need to be able to develop a thought process where you're able to understand what the question setter is asking and then answer based on options accordingly. But a good thing here is that there are a lot of questions based on grammar, vocabulary, idioms and phrases, where a fixed amount of set pattern and structured based preparation can tremendously help you get a fantastic score in this particular section. So understand that you'll have to attempt somewhere around 35 odd questions to get maybe 31 right, 4 wrong, something on those lines, to be able to comfortably clear the cutoffs for the VA section. Now, why is this slide important? One important message that you can take away from this is you don't need to attempt 100% of the paper and forget attempting. In terms of getting right effectively for every section, you will find that the cutoff is considerably less than the percentage marks that you typically get in your board exams. So I'm sure a lot of you would be targeting 80-90% plus marks in your board exams. Here, if you look at the percentage, 28 marks out of 15 into 460, so it is less than 50%. And even more so for QA MCQ, it is only in verbal ability that 45 Forza out of 180 you get slightly more than 50% marks as the cutoff. So you don't need to do the entire paper, and therefore the way you prepare therefore changes. You need to make sure that you're able to figure out those questions that you're going to attempt in the exam, pick and choose the right questions, prepare accordingly so that you develop this habit of picking and choosing the right questions while you are preparing as well. Because if you prepare the way you have been preparing for boards, learning everything step by step, then your ability to select questions might not be that great on the D-Day. So while preparing itself, develop this habit, and I'll be sharing with you the ways to understand selection for questions. If we move ahead, one important aspect that is crucial, especially for people who are in 12th standard, is the important area where you will prepare for board exams, where you will prepare for pre-boards before that, and should we stop our preparation for IPMAT completely at that point in time. So understand, this is a common trap that a lot of people stop preparing for IPMAT from December onwards. My personal recommendation is please don't do this. Make sure that you spend at least 10 to 15 minutes per day. If 30 minutes is a lot more, maybe just 10 to 15 minutes per day during the peak board season to keep that continuity going. So make sure that while you are starting your preparation right now, during the time of December, Jan, and then up till your board exams, please do not skip IPMAT preparation completely, because this is a common feedback that I've received from students when they've done so, and then when they've restarted their preparation after boards, they've felt a lack of continuity. They felt that they're starting all over again. They've forgotten relationships, formulas, techniques that they had learned, and they had to go back to the drawing board and start from, so to say, zero. Please spend 10-15 minutes. And what are you expected to do in these 10-15 minutes during your peak time for boards? Just a quick revision of whatever notes you have made, nothing else, no new solving, but just keep on revising whatever you have covered before that. Now, what is the typical structure you can give to your preparation? So you can divide your preparation into 4 phases. The first phase being from August to December 2026. So in this, make sure that your focus is on foundation and concepts. Your entire syllabus as far as possible should be completed. If not, try and target at least 80+% syllabus completion as far as fundamentals are concerned. Now, let me elaborate what do you mean fundamentals are concerned. Suppose there is a topic time, speed and distance, and there are standard questions like, if you go at a speed of 5, then you get 10 minutes late. If you go at a speed of 6, you get 10 minutes, you reach that particular destination 10 minutes early. Now, this is a standard question type. Anybody who has prepared well would be able to answer the question that what is the distance from the particular home to office or place. Just by looking at the question, you should be able to tell, oh, this is a part of standard theory. I've studied this earlier. Similarly, there are questions on time and work that A can do a piece of work in 10 more days than what A and B together can take. B can do it in, again, some relationship with what A and B together can take. In how many days will A alone be able to do a complete piece of work? Now, these are standard, basic, easy level questions that require some amount of conceptual clarity, and you can get answers to these questions in a jiffy. If you think you have studied that chapter, then the foundation and concept building would mean that if there is an easy level question, if it typically aligns around fundamental concepts, then you should be able to get it right. That is the objective as far as December is concerned. It's okay if you're not able to cover difficult concepts. It's okay if you're not able to solve questions that seem difficult or time consuming, perfectly fine. And therefore your focus should be on NCERT basics, fundamentals of algebra, number theory and vocabulary, because across the spectrum, these could be your high yield topics where from where most of the questions in the exam come. If you look at the period from January to March, your 100% focus should be on 12 boards. Now, despite me being a mentor who is wanting you to excel in IPMAT, I also understand that 12 boards are extremely important. They are not just important in your 12th standard and admission to some of the programs that take admissions via 12 boards. Obviously, they are important there, but throughout your life, which would mean during your MBA, you would want some fantastic placements, some good companies to come and pick you up. Do they look at your 12th standard board marks? Yes. And therefore, please do not compromise on this, no matter what anybody else says. Your 12th standard, as far as the Indian education system goes, is something that almost everybody would look at later on just to see your academic consistency. So you cannot give excuses that I was preparing for IPMAT or I was preparing for JEE or I was preparing for NEET or some other entrance exams and therefore compromised on my 12 boards. I'm someone who would strongly recommend that this pinches you very badly your entire life during your graduation, your post-graduation, etc., etc. So make sure that your 100% focus is on 12 boards. Try and maximize the score that you get here. The only expectation is a 15-minute revision from notes. That's it. Then the part on post boards. Now, this is the time where you are expected to go all in. Make sure that your entire focus, priority, even to an extent obsession is just preparing for IPMAT exam. So make sure that you recover the entire syllabus, solve high difficulty questions and make sure that you complete all PYQs. I am someone who is a big believer that if you conceptually understand all the previous year's questions that have been asked in the exam starting from whichever year they are available, at least they are definitely available from the year 2019 onwards for sure. So if you look at this last 5-7 years papers and make sure that you understand the concept behind every question, the corresponding theory, if there is any formula or cheat code, make sure that you make notes for them. And then if a similar question types from a similar topic comes, then you should be able to answer it correctly for sure. So this is what you have to focus on post boards. Make sure that you spend a lot of time. In fact, take it as a challenge or as something that I'm asking you to do mandate as something which is mandatory, which is to not appear in IPMAT exam without solving each and every PYQ. So think of it as a target. Do not appear in your IPMAT exam without solving each and every PYQ, at least from the last 5 years. So make sure that you plan your preparation accordingly. And the last phase is from mid-April to the first week of May, where you'll go all in, making sure that you're appearing in around 2 to 3 mocks, maybe even more if you're already done with your syllabus. So mocks per week are extremely important because this will build stamina to concentrate and focus for 2 hours, 40 minutes across the 3 sections. Believe me, even if you're very well prepared, there is a good chance that you may not be able to perform to the best of your potential just because you're not comfortable sitting for 2 hours in an exam-like environment where first 80 minutes you're struggling with QA questions and then suddenly maybe a slightly easier to deal with part on VA comes, but your focus is not there. You're getting simple questions wrong in RCs, etc. So make sure that you build that stamina, understand your strategy, which questions to pick, which questions to leave, how to remain energized and focused throughout the 2 hour duration. So all these things matter a lot when you think of the finest of margins when you think of cutoff. So make sure that the last stage is typically when you say that you have to kill it. You have to nail it in terms of your efforts, in terms of your strategy, in terms of the number of mocks that you appear, and then analyzing those mocks very, very sincerely to overcome your areas of improvement. Now, moving ahead, the next part is what is it specifically that you can do for QA, and then we'll move on to VA later. So for QA, understand the first part, which is the art of ABC rule. Now, what does ABC mean? A stands for Abhi Karo, B stands for Baad Mein, and C stands for Chhod Do. Now, if you translate it in English, A would mean question types that you are expected to do right now. The moment you look at a question and you feel that this is a very easy question, there is no point waiting for going through the entire paper. Just immediately solve it, get your answer, mark your answer, save and next, and move on. Type B would be those questions that you would mark for review, and this is where getting comfortable with testing environment is important. There's an option that you can highlight as mark for review and come back later. It gets highlighted in a shade of purple. So once you've gone through questions, you would have already solved type A, which are easy. Look at the question, solve it, mark the answer, move on. Type B would be those that you have marked for review and would come back later to those questions because you feel they are time consuming or they are not very easy, but you know how to solve them, so you'll want to come back and solve them later. Type C are very, very crucial as well. They are the questions that you are expected to leave. Now remember the cutoffs, which is why the discussion on cutoffs is important. If you have to just get around 8 questions net right in the MCQ sections out of 30, so then even if you attempt 12 questions, 13 questions, even if you attempt 15 questions, you are not going to solve 15 questions. Out of 30, if you are going to attempt 15, you are going to skip 15. It's important that you decide on which questions to skip very, very fast. So just quickly glancing, understanding that this is super time consuming or this is not from my comfort zone or I am not able to understand anything from this, let me skip it. You will not do anything with it. So once the first round is over, you will have a set of questions marked for review in purple. You can come back to them later on so that you have gone through all questions in one go, attempted those 3, 4, 5 very easy category questions, and then coming back later to attempt those questions that you could do. Now, why is this important at this stage? Because the exam preparation and mindset is different. While you are preparing, try and develop this habit of trying to judge the questions as well. So you have understood certain theory for a particular topic, let's say profit and loss. You've understood what is profit, what is lot, what is percentage profit, what is percentage loss, marked price, changes in marked price, questions on cheating, adulteration, false weights. You've understood all those varieties that typically can come in the exam. Now, while you are practicing questions or maybe taking a sectional test, take this as a benchmark that before attempting the question, you should be able to figure out, do I think this is easy? And if I think this is easy, I should be able to get the answer right within, let's say, 2.5, at best 3 minutes. If I feel this is going to take more than 3 minutes and is solvable, maybe in 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes, I'll mark it for review and come back later. You're not expected to do this while you're practicing, that you will, mark this option to come back later. But this habit of judging questions has to be developed from the start. Otherwise, if you feel that you've prepared just like you prepare for your boards till May, and then one fine day you're expected to take up this call on judgment, believe me, you'll not be able to do as good a job as you would if you are preparing like this from the start. The second part in QA strategy is focusing on high yield topics so that you can call yourself confidently an expert that from this topic, if an easy or moderate question comes, I'll be able to solve it. Understand that if a difficult question comes from any of the topics, even if it's an easy topic, it's okay if you're not able to get it right because, let's face it, the question was difficult. Most of the aspirants will not be able to solve it. I am also one of them. It's okay. But for a topic which is easy, moderate, for a question type which is easy, moderate, you should have no excuses. So understand, if you look at the previous year's papers, there are at least 5. In some cases, there are slightly more than 5, but at least 5 questions of data interpretation which have been definitely doable. So now this could be your one focus area at the start itself, that let me build the foundation for data interpretation, practice certain questions, maybe take up a practice section test, and then come back to PYQs and check my ability. Am I able to solve these 5 questions? Now imagine these 5 questions would fetch you 20 marks, which is just 8 short of the cutoff that is required typically for last year's paper. So my suggestion would be, it would be a good idea for you to prepare for DLR data interpretation really well, and then cross check your preparation with maybe the 5 questions set asked in IPMAT 2026 or 25 or 24, and see, Are you able to solve all those 5 questions right? And what is the amount of time that you're getting for the same? Again, other topics that are of high weightage are algebra, logarithms, modern math, which typically includes permutations, combinations, probability, and then you have matrices and functions. So these are some topics for which you should be able to attempt all easy and moderate questions for sure. Arithmetic from this is slightly on the easier side, and therefore I am expecting that questions from percentage, profit loss, average mixed allocations, time, speed, distance, time and work are some of the topics which will have very good command over, so that you're able to answer all the easy and moderate questions from that as well. So this is about the QA strategy. Let's move to the part on VA. Now, very important part, which is with regards to grammar. I'm pretty sure a lot of you who are watching would feel that you have decent communication skills. You have studied at English medium schools, and therefore you're pretty well off as far as English is concerned. And even though you don't really remember the rules of grammar, you can just by reading a particular sentence understand that there is something wrong. And a lot of times, I mean, this was something that I used to do a lot, that you go by gut feeling, that, you look at a sentence, something is off. This is the feeling that we get. And we tend to feel, no, if I read the option, this looks to be a better sentence. Now, please understand that the question setters use these very traps. They try and figure out what are the common mistakes that a good English speaking candidate might make who is unaware of rules of grammar. So my suggestion, ditch the gut feeling, learn formal grammar rules, conditionals, subject verb agreement, which is one of the more frequent occurrences, to prevent silly errors, because you'll come back out of the exam and feel, oh, how could I get this wrong? I did not remember this rule. Follow standard rules, you'll do well. And the other part that I would like to highlight is this: your gut feeling accuracy would improve if you focus on grammar. So understand, a lot of times you might not remember the rules all the time, but if you're prepared well for grammar, then the gut feeling that you will develop would be based on some of the learnings that you've done already, and your instinct would probably get more questions right than wrong. So preparation always helps in grammar. That's something that I would recommend. Second part is vocabulary via root words. Now think of word power made easy by Norman Lewis as your Bible. It is imperative. I hope all of you know the meaning of the word imperative. It is imperative for you to memorize all the words from Word Power Made Easy. It's a standard book. I would recommend it highly for anyone and everyone who's preparing for IPMAT and other entrance exams. Why? Look at previous year's papers. You will find at least 1 or 2 questions sometimes that are directly based on the words that are given in that particular book. It has 47 sessions. Each session is approximately around 10 to 15 words. So close to around 600 plus words is the approximate range. If you finish one session daily, and this is important for your preparation, if you finish one session daily, it takes 47 days to finish off that book via making notes. So half an hour to read the session, memorize the words, understand the story behind them, and then making notes for those 10-12 words in the first session, solving, filling the blanks, match the column, etc. It's a fantastic self-help book. You don't need anybody else to guide you through that book. As long as you can read English, you can finish off that book in 47 days if you finish one session per day. Suppose you are very good and you are able to finish 2 sessions per day. Imagine you can finish that book off in 24 days straight. And if you feel you would want to go slightly slower, maybe half a session per day, 1 session in 2 days, something like this, because on alternate days you are not able to do it, maybe around 94, 95 odd days, roughly 3 months. You still have a lot of time. My suggestion would be, before December, you should have your notebook ready for all the words that have ever appeared in Word Power Made Easy. Because if you look at just last year's IPMAT paper, there was a question on somebody who hosts a lot of parties and is very friendly. What is the correct fill in the blanks word? And if you have read that book, there is no way you would forget that the corresponding word would be gregarious. Somebody who is very friendly, outgoing, outspoken, and so on. So gregarious, you would be able to remember if you had done Word Power Made Easy. So one important message, that's your Bible for vocab, must do. I am not saying this is sufficient. So finish that book off as quickly as possible. Then there are a lot of other things that you could do based on root words. For example, ben refers to good. So you have words like bona fide. So what do you mean by bona fide? Fide refers to fidelity and bona refers to good. So something which is done in good faith is bona fide. A lot of times you'll look at legal documents and say that this is the bona fide document of so and so company. It is not allowed to be used without prior permission and stuff like that. So that is, then you have a lot of words like benevolent that again relate to ben, born, something which is good. A lot of words which are opposite to that, which is mal. So benevolence opposite would be malevolent, and so on. You could memorize a lot of words very, very quickly if you understand root words. For example, just one more minute I'll spend on the root word anthropos. So anthropos refers to mankind or human beings. So if I now ask you, can you think of what is anthropology? You would say, sir, logy typically refers to study or science, and anthropology is study of human beings or mankind. That is anthropology. Now, this one word can give you a list of good 8-10 words that you can memorize via anthrop as a root. You could have misanthrope, hater of mankind. You could have anthropophagite, eater of mankind, man-eater, cannibal. You could have anthropoglot. Anthropoglot is anybody who speaks human language. For example, parrots can speak or mimic human tongue. If you repeat, they can repeat certain words that humans speak. So parrot is an example of anthropoglot. Now remember, glot refers to this particular part of our body part from where speech is enabled. So glot typically refers to language or speech. Now if I ask you a question, please do share in comments. Can you think what could be the possible meaning of monoglot? What could be the meaning of polyglot? So if you just understand that glot refers to language or speech, monoglot would be a person who speaks only, fantastic, and polyglot would be a someone. So for example, I would say that probably I am a polyglot. I can speak English, Hindi, Marathi very, very fluently, and a bit of French and Spanish as well. So I would categorize myself as a polyglot. So once you remember that what is the meaning of glot, you'll be able to understand the meaning of a lot of other words like this. So root based learning is a fantastic way to go about doing those things. RC flowcharts. Now RCs are relatively easier to follow. They are not very dense or difficult topics. The only part is for you to make sure that you're able to create a logical structure as to the important arguments made in the passage. So create 60-second mental maps when you're reading a paragraph. So when you're reading editorials or articles or any other stuff that you're laying your hands on, make sure that after every paragraph, do a quick summary in your head that these are the important messages. If possible, a good idea would be to think of the central idea or the main idea of the author in that particular paragraph in one sentence. So develop this habit that you've read a paragraph. Now, can you describe what was important in one sentence? If you develop this habit, RCs would become very easy. Finally, idioms and phrasal verbs. So if you look at some of the phrasal verbs that were asked in last year's IPMAT Indore paper, it was more on the lines of this thing would cost you an arm and a leg. So costing something an arm and a leg typically means something which is very expensive, and letting the cat out of the bag. So letting out a secret is letting the cat out of his bag. Now these questions typically could be done in less than 5 seconds, less than 10 seconds. Now that's really important for you to get those questions right because they are low hanging fruits. Imagine you know the meaning of the idiom letting the cat out of his bag and you are able to mark it in less than 10 seconds. So nothing like it. So I am giving you a task from my side. If you're listening to this video so far, please make sure that you start learning 5 idioms daily. If 5 is a bit too much and you feel overwhelmed by this, learn at least 2 idioms daily and 5 words every day. So 5 words and 2 idioms, or maybe 2-3 words and 5 idioms, irrespective of what you cover in Word Permit Easy while you are attending some classes or doing something else of your own. A separate notebook where you're jotting down and learning 5 idioms and sleeping over it. One more important message in verbal ability, which I think a lot of students tend to miss. We tend to not study for long hours, long days, and then feel that we can complete entire backlog by studying 10, 12, 15 hours a day on holidays. Please don't do that. Sleep is an extremely important part of your preparation. Please do not think otherwise, especially when it comes to areas which require good memory recall. So if you're learning words, idioms, phrases, make sure that you do it in small amounts. Don't develop this habit that I'll memorize 300 words, ratify all of them in one day. No, it doesn't work. Do 5 to 10 words, 20 words daily, sleep over it. A good sleep will make your ability to recall much better. And when you repeat and revise over a period of time, psychology says that this will become a part of your permanent memory. And believe me, this works. I have tried it, I have tested it. Thousands of students who have done this have shared the same feedback. So please make sure that you do things step by step and not all at once. Moving ahead, if you look at the typical timeline that you are expected to give. So a lot of you might have this question, sir, how many hours per week? My general recommendation would be around 10 to 12 hours per week. Now, how do you go about it? Suppose you study for 2 hours every alternate day. So when you study for 2 hours every alternate day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you have 6 hours. And then Saturday and Sunday, you could devote 3 hours each. So that would make up for 12 hours. If you are able to study for all the 6 days in the week from Monday to Saturday, then maybe you could devote 1.5 hours every day. So that covers up 6 to 9 hours. And the remaining 3 to 6 hours you could spend on Sunday if that is a holiday. It's up to you to plan out how are you going to identify those 12 hours per week. The typical time allocation that I would suggest simply on the basis of syllabus, because the syllabus for QA is vast. More hours for QA, around 5 to 6 hours, and verbal ability typically around 3 to 4 hours. General rule is 2:1, 6 hours for QA, 3 hours for VA. But this is a general rule, thumb rule. If you feel your quant is already very strong, you're preparing for JE and you feel, you look at some of the previous year's questions and you feel, this is very easy. Without even preparing, I'm able to get 5-6 questions right. If you feel QA is your strong area, but you're not that great with verbal ability, which can be a reality for a lot of people, then maybe switch this to just 2-3 hours for QA and maybe 4 to 5 or 6 hours for verbal ability. Testing and mock analysis every week for 2 hours. So understand 6 hours for QA, 4 hours for verbal ability, and 2 hours for testing across these areas. 1 hour test for QA and 1 hour test for VA every week. This will get you going. Then topic breakdown. Typically, a good idea would be when you're studying, make sure that concept and theory for a particular topic typically lasts for 2 hours, then the practice for around 2 hours, and the test for 1 hour. This could change drastically based on the topic. Some topics are very lengthy. I'm talking of a sub area. So let's say you take up time and work, understand everything that is to be understood via a class if you are attending classes, or watch some videos which deal with good theory of time and work. So around 2 hours would be required for that. Then the practice would require 2, 3, maybe 4 hours depending on the amount of practice that you need, and then close to 1 hour of testing. So this is what you are expected to do per week. Now, finally, what are the immediate action steps that you are expected to take? Make sure that you identify those 10 to 12 weekly hours and identify and create a timetable or a routine. Remember, being successful, a big part of it is about discipline. And that discipline would come when you identify those hours and stick to your routine week after week after week and so on. Pick vocab sources, word par minute. I've already given a target, root word list, idioms and phrases. I've specifically told you what to do. Revisit NCERT math, 9th, 10th fundamentals of algebra, arithmetic, geometry and numbers. Read one editorial daily. If possible, make sure that you pick sources from which actual IPMAT RC passages have come. So you can quickly Google some of the previous papers and search their original sources. You'll find that a lot of these articles have been from Aeon Essays, Economic Times, Guardian, etc. So make sure you're reading quality content every day. So start today, balance your board preparations as I have shared in the session, and grab your IM seat. That's it from my side. If you have any more questions around these lines or anything to do with IPMAT, feel free to drop those questions in the comments and I'll try my best to respond to them as quickly as possible. That's it from my side. I'll take a leave. Ciao.